In this episode I spend a couple of days wandering around the most spectacular quarry on the Isle of Anglesey in North Wales, looking for intimate details and kind of close-up study shots. And I was amazed by some of the things I found there. By the way, please forgive my croaky voice. I arrived on the island with a tickle in my throat and it very rapidly became a full-on cold, and here I am 9 days later and it's still going strong. Good afternoon. A couple of weeks ago, if you saw my Madeira episode, when I was describing the size of the island, I mentioned that it was around about the same, slightly larger, but pretty much the same land area as the Isle of Anglesey. And here I am today, on a pretty wet, miserable day actually, but it's perfect conditions for me to come and have a little wander around Parys Mountain, which is basically an abandoned copper mine. Once upon a time, one of the most toxic places on the planet, I believe. There's still plenty of copper ore underground, 6.5 million tons of it left, but the place was abandoned because it's too expensive now to extract that. But there's a lot of lead here, arsenic, all sorts of zinc, all sorts of nasty things. So it's the kind of place where people used to dump cars simply, into the quarry pit, because they would literally dissolve in a couple of years and there'd be nothing left other than the tyres. In fact, actually in a minute I might have a look at those, because I came here, the last time I was here was 10 years ago, and my sister recently moved to Anglesey and her house is only a mile from here, so it will be very, very rude while I'm here looking after her dogs not to visit and photograph here in the quarry. So I've got a couple of hours left today. I'm going to be basically doing a bit of scouting around and getting my bearings again, and I've got 2 whole days ahead of me where I can come back, and I think the forecast for the next couple of days is marginally better than this, but actually with overcast conditions it's really, really quite nice for the kind of thing that you can see here, as I'm about to show you. Now there are quite a lot of underground sections to this quarry as well, but obviously I'm not going anywhere near those. But what I am interested in looking at is just some of the most spectacular colours that you'll ever see. It's kind of almost out of this world location really, and it's been used for quite a lot of science fiction television programmes and so on in the past. I can easily imagine a Doctor Who episode having been made here at some point, maybe one of those 70s ones with very human looking monsters. Let's have a wander. Arch here. Over the top of there. Apparently, actually, you can do underground tours here. Look at the colour on this. It's quite amazing. Yeah, apparently you can go underground. I'm not sure if that's one of the entrances or not. Didn't look like there was much beyond that, to be fair. But there are trips that can be like guided tours with a caving group or something, a potholing group maybe. I think my sister's planning on doing one of those at some point. I'm just looking for, I heard some moving water over here, so I'm going to go and see if there's something a little bit different. See if I can find that. I'm not sure if I can get down this ramp. I think I've come to a dead end on this one already. Just around the corner over there is a cave, as I recall, from 10 years ago. Oh, here we are. Certainly an enormous amount of scope here for some really interesting abstracts, quite like this. Yeah. Looks like an eagle's head or something. Maybe come back and look at that in a while. The vast majority of my published output as a photographer would definitely be classed as wider view landscapes, but I think with an emphasis on rich and detailed foregrounds. That's one of the reasons actually I like working with overcast light, because it helps to kind of bring out all that detail in a foreground and then allow the background to act as a setting for the foreground in the image. So although there's lots of foreground detail in my photographs, I've never really found that kind of intimate detail photography is that easy. I've taken quite a few successful close-up and abstract shots over the years, but the issue I have is that I'm never 100% convinced that what I'm taking goes anywhere beyond the representation of the thing I'm looking at. I'm not even sure whether that matters, but at the time I find it very hard to see beyond the fact myself, and obviously then I think that maybe the viewer of my images later will see the same way, and that's actually quite a kind of mental block to overcome. In wider landscapes, the elements are far more obvious from the outset, as are the stories I think that the resulting images tell. So maybe a good analogy is that a classic landscape is a bit like a piece of prose, where an abstract image is more like a poem, whose creation requires a lot more thought, and probably whose interpretation in reading it back also requires that same kind of depth of thinking. I'd be really interested to know your thoughts on this, and really whether I'm overthinking the whole issue in the first place. I think though that whatever the answer, at the end of the day, I know from my own experience it takes a lot longer to tune in and start seeing those intimate detail shots than it does roaming through a landscape and photographing the wider view. That said, when I find a location that has intimate details, there are often lots and lots of them to be found, as long as you give it time. So one of the reasons I've come down here into the bottom of the quarry actually now is actually on the top. When I arrived, it's really, really windy. And there are quite a lot more people up there as well. There's it's obviously a popular dog walking circuit around the quarry itself. So I thought I'd come down here, get out of the wind. It allows me to use my long lens in a moment when I go and start to kind of try and pick out some details from the far wall of the quarry. Whichever side I'm on, there's always amazing colours on the far side, so I can use the long lens. And down here there's a little bit of wind blowing, but it's actually so much calmer than on the top. It's been raining literally all day, and it stopped at around about 2 o'clock. I've just been trying out some ideas actually with some of these red rocks in the kind of greeny blue water. It's a silt on there, I think, that's just making it kind of a creamy green colour, which is quite attractive against the red. But then I saw this lovely detail over here, so I've set up for it. I've already taken my photograph. It was actually 4 images to be stacked because I don't have the ability to tilt shift to get this all in focus. But here's the detail I was looking at. Right on this rock down here. Just go really close in on it. There we go. Really lovely colours. I can't remember the angle. It's sort of a kind of a jaunty angle in my shop, which I'll show you in a moment. Amazing colours though. I think, to be honest, this was probably the first and only image made on day one in the quarry that probably met my expectations of what I was hoping to achieve with kind of sense of depth and ambiguity. Making an image that wasn't really just about a chunk of rock. This went to me beyond that. So I was particularly happy to have actually made one image like this on day one. And I think this is probably quite a good illustration of how I work in the field. You'll see me plonk my camera down on its tripod already. I've got an idea that there's definitely something here, and I'll have a wander then and try and pick out details and views. Even in the wider landscape I do the same thing, just trying to get ideas without looking through the viewfinder. I don't like looking through the camera to pick out an image. I'll fine tune it that way using the geared head on my tripod. But I much prefer to find an image without a camera in my hands. It's actually already 4:45, so I'm going to just come through here to have a look into the big pit, which is the one that's full of tyres. I'll look in here, but I think probably with the light falling and the wind tugging on the camera, no matter what, I will come back tomorrow and have a much longer explore. This is quite a place here. So, being thoroughly wet and cold, and with the light now fading fast, I made the decision to walk back up and out of the quarry and round back to the car to head home for a nice hot drink and some dinner. But it wasn't long before a patch of colour caught my eye, and I went and had a little look to get some ideas for the following day's visit. Staining here is amazing. So again, tomorrow could be somewhere to start out. Wow. Because I normally shoot off a tripod, I typically have the camera set to a 2-second timer if I'm using my wider angle lens. So if I'm using my 24 to 105, I will have a 2-second timer. If I'm using my 100 to 400mm lens, I'll often put it on a 5-second timer just to allow a bit of extra time for any tremor in the camera to settle down after having touched it. And that allows me to kind of step away and allow the camera to do its thing without hopefully any vibration. But when it's windy, or if there's even the slightest breeze, I'll often then revert to using my remote control, as I'm doing here, and that allows me to act as a windbreak. So I'll often be standing in a position like this maybe for 5 to 10 minutes waiting for that precise moment where I can press the shutter. It won't be on a timer, so it'll take the image at the exact moment I want it to, hopefully when there's a slight lull in the breeze. And here you'll see me putting myself between the wind and the camera. Days 2 and 3 were far more enjoyable and much more productive days compared to day 1. Of course, I mean, the obvious thing was that I didn't have the pressure of trying to get some images made before it went dark. I was there much earlier in the day. The weather was certainly less rainy. There were the odd scattered shower going through, but and although there was still a bit of wind, there just wasn't the chance really of kind of that cold, grim weather I'd had on the first visit. So feeling much more relaxed, I was able really just to wander the quarry. I kind of felt more in tune with the place. It was just me and the rock and the odd raven overhead. So I was going with the flow, and I was trying to avoid any self-imposed pressure to be taking photographs. Getting in that state of mind can often take me quite a long time, sometimes hours to tune in, and I think that's where multiple visits to the same location can be really, really successful. Anyone who's been on one of my workshops will know that I like to go back and visit a place more than once. Every one of us on the course will have seen things on visit 1 that they want to go back and have another look at, with more experienced eyes really. So it's patience and it's time, and then the mind and the eyes start to see things that were really invisible when you first arrive on a location. I'm also unfortunately very easily distracted, so dropping down into a quarry and having no horizon really to look at meant that I was more able then to focus on the things at my feet and on the rock walls in front of me. So while I did actually allow myself in the end, as you'll see later, a wider angle view, which I quite like, I wasn't distracted by that throughout the whole day. I was able just to concentrate on wandering the quarry and enjoying the experience of being there and just really soaking up the atmosphere. So I'm just exploring a new area around the eastern side of the quarry, and this area has clearly recently had some activity going on. Maybe something's been bulldozed and it's split some of the rocks open, and because they're split open now, it's the actual natural colour of the shales and so on inside, which is a very bluey grey, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But I'm in the shade. I'm working in the shade. The sun's out on that side. I don't particularly want to work over there, but this rock is facing a blue sky as well, which is really helping to emphasise that colour contrast. So I've got lovely rocks which are mineral stained, and the reds and the rich oranges, and then the new fresh interior of these split boulders revealing really, really cold steel blue grey colours. Really beautiful colour contrast. And having explored further out around the perimeter of the quarry to the east side, where there are lots of pools, I noticed high up on the main quarry pit a cave, and it actually was pretty tricky to get to. Quite a nasty scree drop into it, but with a particularly huge drop off on my right hand side as I came down. And although I haven't filmed myself working my camera and actually making any of the images, this area actually turned out to be probably one of the most productive parts of the quarry. It's a phenomenal little area. It's not easy to get into. I wouldn't recommend it if you haven't got a head for heights, or you're not keen on unstable terrain, but I will definitely head back there again at some point in the future. And here's that wider landscape shot I mentioned earlier on too, with a view out to the northeast from the top of the quarry. Well, thank you very much for watching if you've made it this far, and as usual, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it really does help me grow this channel. Before I show you what are probably my favourite images from this particular trip, I'd like to just bring your attention to a sale of prints I'm having at the moment. If you follow the link in the description, you'll find a decent selection of one-off prints that I'm selling on my website. Please go and have a look, and hopefully there might be something there that you like. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the next episode.